This week on The Destination Angler.
Very often you'll be in 40 or 50 feet of water, and you'll start to see these foam lines form when you get a consistent wind pattern, and you'll go out and kind of start cruising these foam lines, and you'll find carp all over the place. And those carp will probably be the most actively feeding fish around. Those are fish that I've often found will chase down your fly 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet and come after it.
And that was Jeff Wagner talking about carp fishing. Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of The Destination Angler, brought to you by Got Fishing, crafting world-class fly fishing adventures specially designed to your level of experience and budget. And by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping you find new trout waters so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. And by Adams Built Fishing Gear, the trusted source for quality fly fishing gear built to last at an affordable price. And by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. Coming up next on The Destination Angler, we've got some exciting episodes. We're headed to Steelhead Alley in Northeast Ohio for an epic steelhead episode. After that, we hit the Sunshine State for redfish and snook on the fly. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode on the river test with Jilly Bait. Jilly takes us into the world of estate fly fishing, river keepers, and proper English stream etiquette, along with Scotland and the iconic River Spey. You won't want to miss these shows. And if you like the show, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and please share it with a buddy. Want to be the first to know about new episodes? Well, head on over to the Destination Angler Podcast website and become a subscriber. You'll be entered to win a full year subscription to Trout Routes Pro and a 3-month subscription to Anglers Coffee. Pretty awesome if you ask me. We'll select a winner on the next episode. And speaking of winners, Ted from Front Royal, Virginia is our lucky winner this week. Congrats, Ted, and thank you for listening. Now you can listen to The Destination Angler every week with my new podcast called The Destination Angler Adventures Podcast, the podcast about life and fly fishing. We put you, the angler, on center stage to tell your stories and share your adventures. Got an epic story you want to share? Well, drop me a line on Instagram or email. And our destination today is North Sterling Reservoir in eastern Colorado for probably the most underrated and overlooked freshwater fish of all time. You guessed it, carp. And our guest is none other than Jeff Wagner, CEO of Mayfly Outdoors, better known for such iconic brands such as Ross, Abel, and Airflow. North Sterling is a medium-sized reservoir loaded with trout, smallies, and pike, and of course, big carp, where 40-fish days are not uncommon. And man, does Jeff know his stuff. Educated as a biologist, he grew up not far from here in Nebraska and shares his journey from Cabelas retail store clerk to CEO of one of the top brands in the industry. Chasing carp on the fly can be a surprisingly technical pursuit. Today, Jeff explains how to tell common carp from grass carp, food sources and feeding habits, top fly patterns and colors, where carp hang out in lakes, and why windy days can be awesome, plus what types of rods and setups work best. Do carp get a bad rap? You be the judge. Let's hear from Jeff. Well, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very excited to have you on here. And I got to tell everybody out there, this is my carp fishing podcast, right? I've been talking about wanting to do a carp fishing podcast for a while. And honestly, when Jeff, you and I first talked, I thought, last thing in the world Jeff is going to want to talk about is carp fishing. But it was your idea that we talk about carp fishing. So, so here we are.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics. I'm excited.
Right. I guess a guy born and raised in Nebraska, is carp a big game fish for you guys out there?
Yeah, I mean, technically it's not a game fish according to Nebraska, state designations. And I think in most states it's not technically a game fish, but it's an invasive species, but certainly very prevalent, right? prevalent
Yeah.
in most of our states.
Okay. Okay. So you recently moved to Montrose to take this job. Is that correct?
Yeah, we moved to Montrose about a year and a half ago to come and work at Mayfly Outdoors, right? We own
Yeah.
Abel reels, Ross reels, airflow fly lines, and most recently Dynaking vices.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. How are things in Montrose? Do you like it out there?
Oh man, yeah, we love Montrose actually. It's I grew up in, as you mentioned earlier, a small town in western Nebraska of 6,000-ish people, and always have lived in smaller towns for a stint. We lived in Denver, but otherwise we've lived in small towns in Montana or Steamboat Springs, Colorado, Nebraska. And so, to us, Montrose is the right size, right? It's a
Right.
town where you can get what you want, but I'm looking out my window now in my office and got a lake out the window, and we've got the Uncompahgre River about 100 feet away, and the
Oh my
San Juan
gosh.
Mountains that I'm looking out the window. But yeah, super close to lots of great fishing, great small town, decent food, and lots of mountain biking, trail running, fishing, all kinds of stuff. It's great.
And when you were with Winston, did you live in Twin Bridges?
We lived in Dillon, so I'd commute about
Dillon.
30 miles. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dillon's a town of about 4,000. Twin Bridges is a town of about 400.
Yeah.
Couldn't quite convince my family the town of 400 was good, as much as we like small towns, but
Yeah.
Dillon is a quaint little town not far away.
Well, I did a show with an ex-employee of yours, I guess. He's Jerry Kusich, who was one of your rod builders at Winston. We did a show on the rivers around Twin Bridges, and it's a heck of a place to live if you want to fly fish every day, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely the convergence of a number of good rivers for sure. Lots of good fishing.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So, well, let's dive into this a little bit. So, when you think of Colorado, you usually, if you're a fly fisherman, you think of mountains and beautiful streams in Colorado, and it's absolutely loaded. But here we are. We're going to talk about a place in eastern Colorado, right? And I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about the fly fishing opportunities, east of the mountains in Colorado in general. Like, what are people doing out there?
Yeah, I think, that's really one of the things I really appreciate about Colorado and even Nebraska, actually, where I'm originally from, but is that, you've got these great mountain resources, cold water resources. We've got a number of, trout species and waters, but as you get, east of the Rockies, it really opens up into some great rivers and lakes and reservoirs. They've got a lot of warm water species. And so, not too far from the mountains, you can get smallmouth and largemouth and a variety of species of panfish and sunfish and catfish and, pike, muskie, tiger muskie, wiper, and carp, obviously. And it's, for a fly fisherman, it's really an exciting place. It's definitely a different fishery, right? It's a different type of fishing, and you kind of got to be dedicated to it and maybe even drive a little ways. I'm sure we'll talk about this, but I think there's a huge opportunity from a conservation angle as well, as we talk about the conservation of cold water resources and getting people into fly fishing.
Yeah, right. Okay, I definitely want to touch on that. But North Sterling, all right. So you wanted to do a show, featuring North Sterling, and I'd love to hear,
Yeah.
all about that. What makes that so special, and
Yeah.
why is it so good for carp fishing? I'd never heard of it until you mentioned it.
Yeah, North Sterling itself is so it's a reservoir out by Sterling, Colorado. It's about 2.5 hours northeast of Denver on Interstate 76 if you go northeast. And I think it's the one that I've always liked fishing. It was only about 40 miles from where I lived in Nebraska. And it's probably not too dissimilar to a number of other reservoirs that are all along the Front Range, but it's about a 4,000 acre. I think it's about 4,000 surface acres. So it's a pretty good sized reservoir. And it's got smallmouth, it's got some largemouth, it's got wiper, it's got a variety of things, but it probably has the most catchable population of pretty decent sized carp of anywhere I've ever been. And, often, when you talk about carp fishing, for most anglers, they think of carp, if they fish for them, as really hard to catch generally.
Right.
And they've had these experiences where, they're fishing in crystal clear water and they can't get within 20 or 30 feet from carp. And that's often the case, especially as you think about, clear, colder reservoirs. even up some, in the mountains of Wyoming or different places where people fly fish for carp. North Sterling is a warm water impoundment, right? And it's got all these other warm water fish, but it probably, when I say the most catchable population of carp, these carp generally run about 8 to 12 pounds, sometimes up to 15,
Wow.
but, good, healthy, carp population, but they're extremely willing to eat a fly. And we've had days of catching 30, 40, 50 fish days on carp
Really?
of these 8 to 12.
Wow.
And it always sounds like a fish story, but literally we've taken, a number of people. In fact, we shot a couple of TV shows there a few years ago with Chad LaChance, and we shot an episode. If I can tell this story,
Sure.
Chad and I shot an episode a few years ago, and it was in low water in the fall in like June or July. And we picked up a lot of fish, right? We caught a lot of fish and we made a good episode, but I really wanted him to come back in kind of that June timeframe. And so last year, in about June, I had him come out to Sterling and showed up at about 7 a.m. And one of the greatest things about some of these reservoirs earlier in the morning is that these fish will, they have what many carp anglers call this like klooping behavior, right? Where they come to the surface and they're eating on the surface. And often there are pods of fish, and these pods of fish can be anywhere from, 20 to 200, 300 fish, especially at Sterling early in the morning. And so he showed up at 7 a.m. and started fishing and had a fish on in the first 5 minutes. And we had the whole episode filmed within less than 2 hours. By 9 a.m. we were done, and we were just kind of catching fish for fun from the rest of the time. And we were having a beer by noon. And that really exemplifies, I think, North Sterling. And I think there's more reservoirs out there like that. There's more bodies of water out there like that. I like to use Sterling as the example because I think it's a place where a lot of people can go and catch fish, but I don't think it's too dissimilar to other warm water reservoirs that, are a little turbid and a little bit off color. I think it's a little bit about right time of day, right time of year, right flies, right presentation in order to pick up some fish. But it's a cool reservoir. And honestly, there aren't that many people. If you are out fly fishing on any given day, you're probably going to be the only person fly fishing, especially for carp. Over the years, we've started to see a few more people, but it is a lake that you probably will need some kind of a watercraft. You can certainly fish from the dam, but we often have a 18-foot bass boat that we put a polling platform on and can push it around, or trolling motor on the front, and get 2 or 3 of us in it. And, it really is, it's a great way to catch fish. And a lot of fish.
So what is it about Sterling that makes these carp so interested in taking a fly? Is it that it's not that crowded? The fish are more wild? What is it about that place?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We've often talked about that. I think it's dissimilar to what other people maybe have experienced. I don't think it's so dissimilar to other warm water reservoirs. I think it's just that most people don't haven't had an experience where they've been targeting carp in the right conditions, in the right place and time to catch them. But the one thing I will say about North Sterling is the fish are very opportunistic feeders, right? That they're not so keyed in on one particular food source, that they're willing to eat a variety of things. And in a given day, they may be, rooting up some crayfish, and then maybe eating some damsels, and then maybe eating, midges off the surface, or then some kind of plant or vegetative matter at the same time. And so, I think what we've been able to find is that, if we have some good imitator patterns that, kind of look like a leech pattern or something like that, that we can catch them. But I'm sure we'll talk about techniques. I think that's kind of one of the other things that's pretty cool.
With so much information out there, it can get downright confusing and even overwhelming to find the right fishing adventure. Sorting through all the options and fees can be quite the headache. Well, not anymore. I'm super excited to introduce Got Fishing. Got Fishing is a boutique booking agency for world-class fishing adventures around the world. They ensure that you are on the exact fishing trip that meets your skill level, budget, and desired experience. Whether you're a seasoned angler or new to the sport, Got Fishing's personalized service will help you decide which adventure is the best fit for you, your group, or even your business. Worry about fees? Worry no more. With Got Fishing, you won't pay anything extra because their services are entirely free for you. You see, Got Fishing exclusively partners with highly reputable outfitters who gladly compensate them for their services ensuring a win-win situation. Explore the range of fishing adventures and learn more about the services Got Fishing provides at gotfishing.com. That's www.gotfishing.com. And check them out on Instagram too. Hey anglers, if you've been listening to the podcast, you already know Trout Routes has mapped and classified over 50,000 trout streams covering the entire lower 48, including 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. But I bet you didn't know about a brand new feature called Trout Lakes. With a flip of a filter, Trout Routes Pro users can see over 12,000 fishable alpine lakes in the lower 48. You can turn this layer on in the filters menu to open up a whole new set of trout fishing opportunities. You know, there's nothing more exciting than finding that new trout stream, lake, or access point. I'm a huge fan of Trout Routes because they make it so easy. Say goodbye to stumbling around country roads looking for your next spot. Because Trout Routes provides every detail you need for each stream or lake, including public and private bridges, stream flows, trail access, where to park, camping opportunities, boat ramps, and a new feature to calculate actual river miles. How cool is that? No service, no problem. You can save maps for offline use. With Trout Routes, I've found dozens of new streams and access points I never would have known about. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. Let's talk about food sources since we're kind of on that. Like you just ticked off a couple of them, but you know, for people that haven't been carp fishing, you know, what does a carp eat? You know, I always see them. It looks like they're eating grass, and they're even there's a species that's called a grass carp, right? So,
yeah, I think you know, to talk a little bit about carp. So first of all, right, I think it's important to understand where carp come from, right? They're mostly, or not mostly, almost all of them are transplants from Asia, Eurasia, and have, you know, introduced into the country, you know, over the last couple hundred years, initially by the Fish and Wildlife Service as a food source, which I think is really interesting. And in most countries in the world, they are actually eaten, right? Actually, America is one of the few places in the world that actually doesn't eat carp.
You mean a food source for humans or a food source for other fish? For humans.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was the original intent actually when they were stocked here. And I think it's probably one of the worst kind of ecological or non-native fisheries catastrophes they ever had is when, you know, some fish escaped and then eventually were propagated and then sent into other parts of the country. And the primary species that is the common carp, which is Cyprinus carpio, which is, and most of these are minnows, right? They're part of the minnow family. And that's what most people are catching. And so then you'll hear people talk about, you know, common carp, mirror carp, and leather carp. And those are all common carp. Those are all the same genus and species of Cyprinus carpio, but it's just a variation in the number of scales that they'll have. But that's the species of carp that is actually caught, and they're very omnivorous, right? So when you look at their intestinal tract, you look at what they eat. They're eating a lot of insects for sure. They're eating a lot of crustaceans for sure, but they can also eat plant matter. And the reason why I bring all of that up, that's very different from what you hear of grass carp. And the genus and species is Ctenopharyngidondadella. And they're a very, if you look at their intestinal tract, probably 10 times as long as a carp. And they are truly focused purely on eating vegetative matter, right? That they are purely vegetarian, right? From that standpoint, they'll eat some chironomids and other things, and that's often what people catch them on. But that's why when people see these giant grass carp, which can get up to 60, 70, 80, 90 pounds and look like submarines going through the water, you know, they'll be throwing everything at them that they normally would for common carp, and they won't eat. And the reason why is because, they're going to be munching. Literally, they'll cut off the stalk of a cattail or something like that, and will just sit and munch on it. They have these kind of pharyngeal jaws, right, where they can crunch the cattails and continue to eat them. But yeah, so very different from a common carp. And that's what's in North Sterling. That's what's in most of these lakes and reservoirs that you're going to find are common carp. And to your point on the food sources, yeah, they'll eat just about everything. I think at Sterling and many of these lakes and reservoirs, you know, and I think this is another interesting thing biologically when you think about carp is they quit eating basically altogether once it gets under about 40 degrees water temperature. I think it's exactly 43 degrees or something like that.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, their metabolism basically shuts down. And so there's a period of time in the winter where they actually don't eat. And so when carp do start eating is usually around 45, 50 degrees. And really when you start seeing carp really actively or aggressively eating to be 55, 60 degrees. And so, you're in this part of the territory in the country, you're probably talking April and then definitely into the heart of the season in May and June. And that coincides really well with, a lot of aquatic insects that are going to be coming up, and especially damselflies and those kind of things. So you'll see them key in on definitely on midges and, chironomids, lots of damselflies. And they'll, turn on their side and eat damselflies climbing up the stalk as they're getting ready to emerge.
Yeah.
But then a lot of crayfish too, right? They love crayfish. And, I think the behavior that most people think of is like, tailing carp, right? Like tailing bonefish and redfish.
Right.
And that's pretty common that you'll see carp eating crayfish and rooting in the mud and looking and looking down. They're a little tougher to catch, I would say, in that situation, because they create such a giant mudded area, and we call them muds, and that can be kind of tough. So you have to use some patterns with noise and that kind of thing. I think the primary component of their diet, though, especially when you look at some of these larger open reservoirs, is going to be this more opportunistic feeding where it is insects. It is going to be some terrestrials that'll get blown into the lake, and then it'll be some combined with some kind of vegetative matter. And that becomes pretty apparent when you catch one and they might excrete on the boat and it comes out green because they're eating whole bunch of algae and other things, right? And yeah, not to say that they won't aggressively go after crayfish and other things, but very omnivorous. So
no kidding.
Yeah.
Will they take a fly on the surface?
Yeah, for sure. So in fact, I will tell you, I can't imagine fishing for carp when you can't see them. So everything we're doing is, within sight. So within maybe 2 feet from the surface. And most of them, I would say, are within 18 inches of the surface and very often on the surface. And you'll hear people talk about them, eating cotton. And there are times, I think, when they are eating, directly off the surface, especially if there's, midges and things like that are coming up. More often than not, on a lot of these reservoirs, you'll see these carp moving in pods of fish. And typically it's anywhere from 4 or 5 to maybe 20 or 30 fish, especially on the edges of vegetation and things like that. And as they're cruising, they're just opportunistically feeding. And I think especially when they're kind of around, 62 to 70 degree water temperature. And so for us, the best thing to use is some kind of a leech pattern. And my favorite would actually be like a Rickard's seal bugger in kind of a maroon or burgundy color. There's a number of other patterns that would be similar to that, but, typically in a size 8 to 12. And, as you're casting, you're not looking necessarily for the fish in the middle. What we'll often try to do is pick fish on the flanks that are a little bit deeper, where you're not going to spook the whole pot of fish.
Sure.
And that's you're kind of picking those fish off. So even if they are somewhat keyed in on these other species or on these other food sources, something like a Rickard's seal bugger, or even a damsel pattern, or sometimes we'll fish both, right? Like a Rickard's with a small damsel pattern behind it, 18 inches or so. And that's usually our most popular fly choice.
No, that's cool. I had no idea. Yeah, that's super interesting. And I mean, is it possible to catch a grass carp, or should you just move on? If your lake is full of grass carp, go find another lake.
No, no, grass carp definitely can get caught, and often, and I won't say often, but there's definitely some anglers that have figured out how to catch them, and they've actually come up with some patterns that look like stalks of vegetation in various kinds.
Is that right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, for sure. As well as there are times where they will eat chironomids, and so there are some instances where guys have keyed in on them on certain bodies of water, and they'll feed, they'll try to get them to eat chironomids, and that's been successful. They are just it's more like a cow, right? If you're going to try to catch a cow, that's really what they are. They're the cows of the carp family.
Yeah, no kidding. And you tell the difference mostly by size, or can you visually say, okay, I can tell that's a grass carp? And that's
very, very different body shapes and mouth shapes and colors, right? Like a common carp has kind of got this turned down mouth and this high dorsal fin with a first dorsal ray that's super spiny, and they're kind of that brown or copper color in most bodies of water, and have that kind of classic minnow pattern, minnow shape, if you think about it, right? A little bit of a deeper body. And grass carp are going to be much more torpedo shaped. They're going to be longer, don't have quite as big of a dorsal fin. Mouth is much more pointed forward, a little bit up, and they're a little bit more silver and gray. And then, there's all these other species of carp now too that are invading different bodies of water. When you think about, silver carp and big head carp and all of these others, all of these are kind of Asian transplants, but most of those are actually feed on plankton. They're actual filter feeders when you think about like a big head carp. So very different. It's amazing to me the differences in kind of life histories and the way that they are able to eat food when you think about these fish that are kind of somewhat related, but
yeah, right.
Between these filter feeders, those that are going to be eating almost purely vegetative matter, and then common carp, and common carp are, far more diverse in what they can eat. And that's what has made them, really, so successful now they're in every state in the US, and and are an invasive species and are often very destructive in what they do, but their ability to reproduce, their high fecundity rates, and their ability to eat just about anything is what has, made them so successful.
Yeah.
Populating the US.
Yeah, they seem to be everywhere. Are you an avid angler in search of top-notch fly fishing gear that's easy on the wallet? Well, look no further than Adams Built Fishing Gear. Adams Built is the ultimate choice for anglers who prioritize quality, affordability, and style. Established in 2014, Adams Built has been the trusted companion for thousands of anglers, creating unforgettable moments on the water. Seasoned pros and beginners alike will love their lineup of lightweight and durable waders and wading boots, high-quality nets and fly rod starter kits, and meticulously designed fly boxes and outerwear. When I first heard about Adams Built, I have to admit I was a bit skeptical. Having run through many pairs of waders over the years, I wondered about their guarantee. So get this, folks, all Adams Built branded products are guaranteed to last, and Adams Built waders carry a lifetime repair or replace guarantee. You only pay shipping. Hard to beat that. So why not make Adams Built Fishing Gear your go-to choice? Check them out at a dealer near you or at adamsbuiltfishing.com. That's Adam Built Fishing, the trusted source for quality fly fishing gear. Hey anglers, you've heard me talking about Angler's Coffee for quite some time now, and I have a question for you. Have you tasted it yet? Well, if you have, then you know what I'm talking about. It's darn good coffee, isn't it? Hey, if you're like me, tasting's believing, and believe me, this coffee tastes great. My wife and I are hooked on it. Angler's Coffee offers an impressive spectrum of flavor profiles, so there's something for everyone. When you're spending a day on the water, you need a great cup of coffee to carry you through, like the Coachman's Blend. Named after the famous Royal Coachman, you'll love the design of the bag as much as the coffee. This blend of medium and dark roasted coffee from Central and South America produces a flavorful and smooth cup with notes of chocolate and baking spices and a smooth finish. Order some today and save 10% with a custom subscription like I did. You pick the coffee blends you want, and they're delivered right to your doorstep. And if you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. No kidding. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations in the fly fishing community. So put a smile on your face, just like I did, and give it a cast. That's Angler's Coffee. Tasting's believing. I want to read something to you I found on the Colorado Parks and Wildlife site about North Sterling. I thought this was interesting. It says, although best known for the excellent wiper, walleye, and catfish in the reservoir, North Sterling is also home to rainbow trout, smallmouth and largemouth bass, yellow perch, bluegill, crappie, northern pike, tiger muskie, drum, and carp.
Yeah.
Very last.
Named last, yeah.
And I think that's kind of like a lot of anglers think of carp, it's kind of in last place. Do you think carp fishing has a bad rap?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, all of those other fish will eat flies, right? And are fun to catch. And even in Sterling Reservoir, right, on any given day when you're there, it certainly is possible while you're fishing for carp to catch the drum, to catch the catfish, to catch the trout, and we have on any given day.
Yeah.
But the population of carp is great enough that you can consistently catch them, which is different from those other species. I would definitely. So does carp get a bad rap? So Carp are an invasive species. I don't like that. Being a guy that
as a biologist,
having some background in fisheries and just being a conservationist and believing in cold water conservation, I don't necessarily like them, right? From that standpoint, I kind of wish in many ways that they'd go away, but the reality is that they're not going to go away.
Right.
And there's been some opportunities or some chances to try and eradicate them from different bodies of water. And it's almost always proven to be unsuccessful. Rarely have we ever been able to eradicate a carp from body of water. And usually the way they do it, right, is use rotenone or some other chemical, right, that basically kills any kind of aquatic life.
Everything.
And then you've got to come back and restock it. And that's not healthy either, right? That's not good. And I think though that's why I like carp in many ways is that. So let me back up a little bit. We as fly fishermen, we all of us want to see more people fly fish often, right? And we say that we love fly fishing, we love to cast, we love to catch fish, and fly fishing is just cool. At the same time, when we think about that, if that means that there's going to be more people showing up on my trout stream, right, on my backyard, on my do I want that? Is that what I want? And it kind of creates this odd, kind of juxtaposition between, we want more people to fly fish, but not, do we have enough cold water resources? And in many ways we do, right? There's enough miles of cold water streams to be able to hold a lot more anglers, but those streams that are most accessible are the ones that people end up fishing most often. Right. And it can get crowded, and we end up with some kind of sacrificial sections of cold waters, right, through towns and different places that get heavily stocked, and that's okay as well. But to me, that's right. Here's where I would say enter carp, right? If you really want to get people to fly fish, I think one of the greatest things that we can do from a conservation standpoint is to get people to fish for these other species that are super fun to catch, super hard to catch, very willing to eat a fly. You can't, often we can't damage the population. And if we do, good, right? Like that's great. So you can put, you could put hundreds of days on a lake like North Sterling Reservoir to fish for carp and, not negatively impact that body of water, right? We can get, in fact, you may positively impact that body of water because you may have some mortality rates on some of those carp that get released, and it's an invasive species. We don't want them there. The state doesn't want them there. So, it's actually a good opportunity. And at the same time that you might be doing good on North Sterling and you're having a ton of fun catching fish, and you're working on your casting because it sometimes is a 20, 30, 40 foot cast. At the same time, those are also days that you're not putting on a cold water resource. So it just to me is a win-win all around. And it's one that they get a bad rap from that standpoint. But in my mind, there is no greater opportunity we have as a fly fishing community than actually to get more people fishing for species like carp, right? That are a non-native, high invasive, high population, fun to catch fish that probably lives closer to most every American than a trout does, and to fish for them and to learn how to fish for them, because doing that again is giving people an opportunity to catch for fish. We can get more people on the water, and at the same time, you're not putting pressure on these cold water resources. And so to me, it's almost, while it does get a bad rap, it's almost the perfect quarry for the angler because of all of that, right? It is the fish that you can go and fish every single day for and not hurt the population. And if you do, high five, that means there's going to be more bass or more trout or something else in the water.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a skillful fish. It's a fish that takes skill to catch.
And you guys have a carp reel, correct?
Yeah, we do. We have a couple of reels that, we've got a Derek DeYoung carp scale reel. And then we have a Casey Underwood engraving as well. I may own a few of those. Trying to pull that forward. And I mean, that's part of, what we try to do at Mayfly is a lot of it's about conservation, right? We're not a company, we're not a fly fishing community without supporting these resources. And again, to me, definitely want to support native fisheries restoration. And it seems odd, but I think there's almost no better way to do that than actually to get people to fish for carp.
Right. Get them out of there.
And then to have, funding go to native fisheries restoration. So yeah,
Sure.
it's cool.
Have you ever eaten a carp yourself?
That's super interesting. I
have not.
I have. I've eaten a couple different species of carp. And yeah, so my dad actually went to Romania for a couple of weeks and came back with canned carp. And so I've eaten canned carp.
Huh.
I've eaten silver carp at a restaurant in, where were we? Somewhere on the Eastern Coast. I'll think of it in a minute, but, and it was fantastic, by the way.
Really?
They have a special process that they use to remove the bones. But yeah, it was really good. Very few instances, right, where that's the case. I will say so I'm also do a lot of conventional fishing, and there was a really fascinating in one of the magazines called In Fisherman, which, if you're a conventional angler, you'd be very familiar with. But Doug Stange, one of the primary editors there, did a number of surveys, because at the same time, there's been a similar kind of ethos that's run through In Fisherman for a period of time, and it's super interesting. They did an actual taste testing survey between silver carp, walleye, I think it was striped bass, and the winner between those three. And this is a survey that was done a number of years ago, and it was just a small kind of thing that they did inside the magazine. But the winner was actually silver carp, and it's this really white, really good flesh. But you have to call it something else, I guess, if you want to commercialize it, because it would have to be called just whitefish or something.
Yeah.
But it actually has a
yeah.
But it does have a really good texture and a good flakiness to it, and especially if it comes out of cold water.
No kidding. I would not have guessed that. All right, so I wanted to ask you, let's talk a little bit about carp fishing techniques. So you've touched on some of these, but what are the kind of the things that like your pro tips? What are things people need to keep in mind?
Yeah. So, I can just kind of walk through a little bit of kind of equipment to casting, and then
Sure.
on. And so, from an equipment standpoint, especially open water, will generally be using 6 to 8 weights. I'd probably recommend an 8 weight, especially if, you're getting into some cattails and those kind of things. But there are even times where we'll use 5 weights. But you can fish for them with just about any weight of rod. I do like, a more heavily, more aggressive front taper, like an Airflow universal taper or a streamer taper of some kind that's really going to turn over some of these bigger bugs. Typically using fluorocarbon, so like a 9-foot fluorocarbon leader, 2X, 1X, 0X even. Pretty easy. Fish can't see it. They can be a little bit spooky, but also gives you a little bit, sinks a little bit, which is nice, kind of gets you a little bit subsurface.
Yep.
Yeah. And, flies, wise, I think I mentioned, if you open up my box for something like a North Sterling Reservoir, it's going to have just a couple of bugs in it. It's going to have rows and rows of damselflies and rows of something like I said, like a Rickard seal bugger or a swimming leech or something like that. And typically in Burgundy, I've normally got 1 or 2 strands of like a flashaboo, very little flash, just a trigger, as Gary Borger used to call it. Just that kind of micro trigger or something that's just going to catch a little bit of attention, but not so bright to spook them. And I think that's kind of the magic fly. And I think the one thing that I would say from there ends up being casting and presentation. So many anglers, right, when they're out fishing for carp, they'll see the carp and they cast at the carp, right? And even will have the fly land on the carp. And I think the key to carp fishing is really being able to pick a fish and then know kind of direction that it's going. And the reason why I say that is, right, you have to, it's going to sound dumb, but you have to know the different, where the head is. And it's because carp often won't move. Sometimes they will, but often will not move a super long distance in order to eat, right? They're opportunistic. They're just swimming through the water. They've got their mouth open and they're just consuming as they're kind of swimming.
Yeah.
And so you have to really get the fly in front of them. And so if, let's say at 50 feet, I see a pot of 10 fish, I'm first looking for the direction they're going, and is that direction kind of consistent, and can I count on that direction? Is it somewhat predictable, and what's the pace, right? What's their movement? And then out of that group, I'll kind of wait till they get a little bit closer and, maybe within 20 or 30 feet. Generally, I'm usually not casting a super long ways. And here's why is I want to pick a fish. I want to pick one fish out of that group that I can specifically target and cast beyond and in front of. Very similar to what you would do with saltwater, but beyond and in front of. And far enough in front, right, that you can pull the fly back and have it intersect far enough in front that you're not going to spook the fish or hit him on the head. Far enough but close enough that the fly is not going to sink below their position. So for
like
me,
a couple feet.
So
Jeff? Okay.
Yeah. So for me, this is typically the pace carp are moving is usually like 3 feet beyond, 4 feet beyond, and 3 feet in front. And I'm going to have that fish as it's moving. I'm going to strip the fly back in until it intersects with the fish. And so, the golden moment is that you've stripped the fly back in and it's just barely moving at the same point when, the carp is within 6 to 12 inches of the fly. And that sounds like it's hard to do. But again, if you're casting beyond and in front, now it's all about stripping and getting the timing of getting the fly in front of the fish with the strip. Now, the most critical component of this, and this is giving away the secret, but the most critical component is as the fish intersects the fly is to stop. Everybody wants to continue to strip or they want it to chase it. And that's what bass do, right? A bass or a piscivorous species
speed up.
like that.
Sure.
Yeah, they'll spit up. They're going to speed up. They're going to attack it. They're going to chase it down. They're going to eat it. But again, carp are they're kind of cruising along and they're just going to eat what's in front of them. And if something's, running away from them, typically, not always, but typically they don't chase it. And so you want that fly to strip it in front of them, get it again within 6 to 12 inches of the nose, and then stop. And as that fish continues to intersect, and they're going to intersect the fly and they're going to suck it up. And so what I look for then is actually, and this is why I'm usually fishing within 20 or 30 feet, is I'm actually looking for kind of a gill flare, right? And it's this kind of sucking in the water, this buccal cavity that they have where they kind of suck in the water. And that's what I'm looking for. And once I see that, then a slight pause, and then you set the hook. And the most common thing, right, is that, again, people are waiting for them to get close, but they don't actually wait for them to intersect, or they continue to strip. And so they're almost always pulling the fly out of the fish's mouth, or they're pulling the fly away before the fish actually has a chance to eat it. Yeah. And it's kind of like sometimes, fishing dry flies on a stream where, you're too quick, right? You see the fish come up and you're pulling it out of their mouth. And so it really is that moment where the fish intersects the fly, you pause, you visually want to see them suck the fly in and then set the hook. And if you can do that, you'll catch fish all day long.
And what kind of a set? Are you doing a trout set? Or are you a strip setting? What are you doing there?
For me, it's more of like it's a bass set, right? It's pretty hard, right? Carp,
Walmart set.
Yeah, man, they've got pretty soft mouths and it's pretty tough to pull to rip through. But you can set on them pretty hard, especially if you've got 1X or 0X on, setting pretty hard into them. But yeah, for sure, a good solid lift. It's not a strip strike or a strip set as much, but yeah, a little bit more of a trout
set. Good yank.
Yep.
All right. So I got so many questions on what you just said there. That's awesome. I hadn't thought of that gill flare. So when I'm casting 3-4 feet out in front of this fish, and that's so like when the fly hits the water, will that splash scare, spook the fish? And is that why I'm doing that?
It certainly can, right? I mean, they're not used to food hitting them in the face. So
right.
You're casting out in front and beyond, right? It's giving the fly a chance to kind of settle into the water. And then it looks like it's just a kind of food item that's moving in front of them.
Okay.
Yep. And a pretty slow pace. And then, again, just waiting for the fish. The key is waiting for the fish to intersect your fly and not necessarily. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And when the fly is like 4 feet away, I'm not sure how good carp's eyesight is, but is it 4 feet away and you're stripping? Is that because you want to get that timing down and you're not so worried about it being a natural looking movement?
Yeah.
And then you slow it down so it's more natural so the carp takes it. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, so carp actually do have pretty good eyesight, but when
Okay.
they're that close to the surface, their cone of vision is pretty narrow. So if you're casting 4 feet in front and 4 feet beyond, what it allows me to do is it gives me enough length of line to be able to, to strip in to really time that intersection more than anything.
That's the goal.
But then also to not hit them or not spook them in any way. So stripping to get them to intersect.
Okay. And then as you're picking these fish out, so you've got a pot of 15 fish, you're picking one on the edge. Is there something you're looking for about a specific fish? Like that fish is feeding and I want to get a fly in front of that
Yeah.
guy. That one is not? Like, how do you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do a presentation where we talk about the different feeding types of carp and how carp feed and all of that kind of thing. And there's a couple different behavior types that you're going to see in carp. So we'll just kind of walk through a couple of them here. But
Yeah.
the fish the one that always intrigues me when I'm on a boat with someone is when carp are jumping out of the water, right? You often see carp jumping out of the water, and
You do. Yeah.
obviously it's not a fish. It's not a catchable fish. It's not a fish that I'm going to go after. There's lots of reasons why they may be doing, especially during spawning, breaking up eggs, those kind of things. But that's a non-catchable fish. We'll just call it that. There's then fish that we'd call like cruisers, and they have clamped fins. So the one thing you're looking for in carp where they're actively feeding, is their pectoral fins, right? So the fins that are closest up to their gill plates, and you're looking for those kind of moving around. And if they're actively eating, those are going to be kind of open or out. The one thing you don't want to see, and fish that often won't eat, are cruisers, and cruising carp often have clamped fins. So they'll have their pectoral fins, their pelvic fins, and even the dorsal fin kind of clamped against their body. And they're really just using the caudal fin, the tail fin, just to kind of push them along, right? They're moving from point A to point B. They got spooked by something. Those are, again, fish that I wouldn't even waste my time on.
Huh.
Yeah. The two that I definitely am looking for are these active feeding fish where, again, dorsal fins up, pectoral fins are out, and it gives them an opportunity and ability to stop and move and maneuver really quickly. Those are the fish that are going to be the most actively feeding. And then these cloopers, right? These fish that are going to be eating on top and actively consuming off the top. Those are the two that I typically would try to key in on. And if you see a pod of carp, right, and no matter how big it is, normally if there's a pod like that, especially if they're kind of moving in a V shape, which is often, they're the case that they're sometimes moving in kind of a V formation. Almost all of those fish will be feeding. There's usually a lead fish that'll be a little bit shallower, and then the fish on the flanks often will be a little bit deeper in the water. But again, fishing to the fish that are kind of on the flanks of the pod won't spook the main fish, right? If you spook the fish in the front, you're going to spook all of them. Sometimes if you spook a fish on the side, they'll peel off and you won't spook the entire pod. So,
right.
So you're looking for, mostly pods of fish with kind of open fins that look like they're eating. And if you get close enough, and it's usually not too hard, right? 20 or 30 feet away, you can see the mouth move too, right? That's usually not too hard to see. Carp do often then move in, they'll occasionally will be in singles. So I think the time when they have the most confidence and when you can normally pick off the most numbers of fish is when they're going to be in these groups, in these pods. Often fish, carp are feeding individually. So usually when you see that the most is when they would be eating crayfish or cruising the banks and looking for food individually. They're a little bit more spooky when they're like that, but again, you'll see those pectoral fins kind of come out, and when they're moving around, and then occasionally they'll go tail down, and so nose down, tail up, and so those tailing carp would be kind of this other kind of fifth kind of pattern or behavior type. And those fish are actively feeding. They're very aggressive. They can be a little bit spooky. And when you see tailing carp, I usually try to use, some kind of a weighted crayfish pattern, streamer pattern or something. Often something that's got a little bit of movement and then a little bit of sound. So I do tie some of my crayfish patterns with a rattle, and then with claws that are that are going to move around, or a little bit of something, and that clicking sound, they're excellent.
They'll
hearing.
Go check it out.
Yeah, they can pick up on that. And when you're fishing for tailing carp, and this is true of a lot of fish that tail, but is looking at that tail. It's a lot like us, right? That if you're concentrating on something, normally you go still, right? If you have a hunting dog in the field, they go still.
Yeah.
But if when they're keyed in on something, carp are the same way, right? If they're actively feeding and they're just kind of digging around, and you go to throw your fly out there and you think it's close, and all of a sudden you see that tail of that carp pause, he knows something's up, right? He's looking.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's looking. He's like, I heard something. I'm going to be still for a minute. And that's often then immediately after that where you'll see a movement towards your fly to for the carp to eat it. And so often, we're fishing for tailing carp where you can't even see right there. It's in the middle of a mud and you're just getting it kind of close and you're trying to get it within them, and you're watching them tail. You're watching the movement of the tail and watching the movement of the body of the fish. And often you don't see them eat the fly. Then you can't see their head or anything. And it's often just waiting for them to kind of what you think is
Super
a
cool.
pause and a turn, eat, and then set.
Yeah. So where in a lake do you find carp? What do you look for?
Oh gosh. Yeah. They're, literally everywhere. We've, so I guess I'll just call out a couple of places. So, if you're coming up on a reservoir, anytime you come up on a reservoir, this is true for most species of fish, but a dam is always a good place to start. It's kind of a heterogeneous habitat, lots of nooks and crannies, lots of bugs and insects and crustaceans and that kind of thing for all fish to eat. And so that's a good place to start for sure. I do really like, big open mud flats are kind of that classic thing where you're looking for tailing carp and they're going to be eating crayfish or something like that. And that's a cool place as well. I think for me, the two places that I key in on, and this is very true at North Sterling Reservoir, as well as some other reservoirs that have similar characteristics around there, like a Pruitt Reservoir, a Jumbo Reservoir. Those are also reservoirs in northeastern Colorado. But I would be looking for submerged weed beds. So where I know that there's vegetation, 3 to 5 feet of water, and I can see the vegetation subsurface, and carp kind of cruising around because they're going to be in there eating not only on the plants, but they're also going to be eating on any of the insects that are going to be coming up, and especially those damselflies. Yep. And it gives the carp, it's an opportunity for them to get a little bit of protection, right? But there's also a good food source close to deep water where they can get out of the way. If you get in really shallow water where carp are tailing, if you spook them, they're gone, right? They're just going to take off to deeper water. And often what happens if you're in that kind of 3 to 6 feet of water with this vegetation, you'll just see them drop, right? If you spook them, they just kind of drop out of view. And then once they get comfortable again, they'll come back up. So definitely these kind of vegetated areas are definitely the ones that, definitely look at, especially like in May and June when you're eating damsels, for sure. Now, the other one though that's really interesting, obviously Eastern Colorado gets a lot of wind, and on a heavy wind day, 15, 20, 25 mile an hour winds, it's not often fun to fish, but you're going to get, you start getting some whitecaps on the lake. And when you get these whitecaps on the lake, you start getting these foam lines. And this is true for trout fishing as well. So this works for trout also, but within these foam lines, right, that starts forming on open bodies of water, right, in these reservoirs, that foam is a collection of proteins and other things like that, but it's often a collection of food, right? There's insects in there and everything's kind of getting washed into these foam lines. And very often you'll be in 40 or 50 feet of water, and you'll start to see these foam lines form when you get a consistent wind pattern, and you'll go out and kind of start cruising these foam lines, and you'll find carp all over the place. And those carp will probably be the most actively feeding fish around. Those are fish that I've often found will chase down your fly 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet and come after it, right? Because there's wind, there's whitecaps, there's noise, they're not as spooky at all. There's quite a bit of food. There's a lot going on, and so especially if it's in a little bit clearer water and you can see him in that open water, you can get a cast within eyesight, which is often that kind of 2 to 6 foot window. They'll often chase it down, and
wow.
and that's probably my favorite time, because the takes are aggressive and the fish are just kind of lit up. And those are the fish that will probably run you into your backing and take off for sure. It's awesome.
So you've had some, can you think of a time when you have had a carp run you into your backing? Is that pretty common?
I would say at those reservoirs, it's super common. Like 8 to 12 pound fish, you can normally take on, in 90 feet, a 90-foot fly line, and won't often take you. But for sure, on some of these lakes, occasionally, you'll hook up on a 15 to 20 pound fish, and those fish definitely will take you into your backing, especially in kind of cooler open water or super oxygenated water. Those fish just take off and will definitely take you into your backing.
Huh, no kidding. Can you think of a time you've done that and tell us how that happened, how that came about?
Yeah, I mean, it actually would be at a different reservoir, which I'm happy to tell you about as well. But it's a reservoir in western Nebraska, and it's got a lot bigger fish. But early in the spring, you'll get these cottonwood trees, and the water comes up. It's an irrigation reservoir, so the water comes up into these cottonwood trees, and you'll be fishing 10 feet of water inside the trees, and just trees everywhere. So you can't really make a super easy cast, but on this one occasion, we were fishing back in these trees, and it's again, just these pods of carp, and I've seen big fish in this reservoir, but I've never seen fish this big. And on this trip, we saw a couple of fish that would have gone around 25 pounds, just kind of surface feeding within the trees, shallow, but nose up, klooping kind of behavior. Yeah. And, landed a fish that was, a little over 25 pounds.
Really?
And, just fortunately, went straight out into open water, took off, went pretty deep. But yeah, definitely into the backing and a good healthy fish. That's,
how about that?
A little colder water too. That was early in the spring, but yeah, I think that's so North Sterling Reservoirs are what we're kind of talking about, but that characteristic of these kind of irrigation reservoirs, they're full of carp. And so, we could name 100 probably reservoirs from all along the Front Range of Colorado into Wyoming, Nebraska, eastern Montana, and kind of all over the country, right, that would have these. But they're they really grow some big fish for sure.
I guess. Well, I was thinking about this. Like, are there trophy carp fishing places in America, or is it like you say, it's all these reservoirs can have great fishing? Sounds like it.
All of them can. I would say that there's a few that have gotten to be pretty well known. When I think of Flaming Gorge Reservoir, Pathfinder, Seminole, some of these larger cold reservoirs, definitely kind of that classic flats fishing. Lots of fish, definitely get all these different types of behaviors. In those kind of colder reservoirs, I think their longevity is a little bit better. The environment's not quite as harsh from annual variations in temperature and those kind of things. And you get a lot of big fish right in those reservoirs. So those would be maybe a little bit more trophy carp fishing. Feels like a little bit of an oxymoron, but trophy carp fishing.
Yeah, I'm back to that Abel carp reel. There's got to be trophy carp out there if Abel's got a reel for carp. I don't know.
Yes.
Right. Well, let's talk about your journey a little bit. So here you are, CEO. Congratulations of Mayfly Outdoors. Tell us about your journey. How did that all come about? Like, where did you you started where as a young guy doing what?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? I started fly fishing probably like a lot of people, right, when I was 8 or 10 years old, and it really caught me early. I grew up in Nebraska. I grew up in Sydney, Nebraska, where Cabelas is from, and I think like a lot of kids, I started fly fishing, but I really started casting and tying flies, right? So Sydney, we had some small lakes and streams and stuff around, but nothing, super exciting that I could just go to as a kid, right? It'd take my parents kind of taking me somewhere. So I really got into casting and tying early on. And so growing up in Sydney, my journey was really about meeting a lot of these people that were well-known anglers at Cabelas that were, buying and professionals within the outdoor industry. And many of them, taught me how to cast and to tie and to fish. And some of my first memories are these guys taking me to, the Green River, different places, and fishing with them. And
wow,
that was super cool from kind of a mentoring standpoint, and something that I still kind of remember. And so my first job, I guess, in fly fishing industry or in the outdoor industry was working at Cabelas at the retail store in Sydney, Nebraska, working in the fly fishing area and, selling rods. And I was really taken by casting. I loved casting and I think mostly due to the nature of the windy conditions in Nebraska, I had to get good at casting and, in order to cast into a 20 or 30 mile an hour wind. And so, started working at the retail area, but then also started pursuing the Fly Fishers International certified instructor program. Some people have probably heard of it, some maybe not. But really got involved in that. And really for me, that's where I met so many great people that took their time to help me. And a lot of it was me kind of reaching out and being a pain in their, pain in their side.
Really? Is that right? Okay.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I remember, trying to, and they didn't know me for anything. Right. But just calling or emailing Tim Rajeff or Steve or Rajeff or Simon Gosler, any of these guys that I could think of that I would see on TV or read about.
You call them and email them? Really?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I ask them casting questions
great.
And that kind of thing. And the amazing thing to me though, is how open they were. And I'm still good friends with Tim Rajeff and with a number of those guys. And they've just been so gracious over the years. And so it really took the time. And that's really, what encouraged me to stay in that casting instructor program was this idea that I could meet great people that would help mentor or coach or teach me everything I could learn and would put up with so many of my stupid questions. And so got my certified instructor and master certified instructor and
that's great.
Served on the board of governors and all that kind of stuff, but did that, for a number of years at Cabelas. Eventually went to Colorado State University as a little bit of a non-traditional student, but for fisheries, aquatic biology, and really took to that and spent some time with National Park Service doing native fisheries restoration work, which was
nice,
super fun. I was working for what they call these fee demo parks, which are the smaller parks that take fees from the big parks like Rocky Mountain or Yellowstone and help fund projects in these smaller parks. And worked on a variety of native fisheries projects. In Colorado, California, Washington State, and all over the place. Did that for a little while, while also guiding a little bit. So guided a little bit in southern Wyoming, as well as in Rocky Mountain National Park for Kirk's Mountain Adventures and Kirk's Fly Shop. And love fishing in Rocky Mountain National Park. It's one of the greatest places, I think, on the planet. And learned to guide up there and it was just a really awesome time for me, kind of around that Fort Collins area and fisheries and working in the industry and guiding and really getting to teach casting a lot and doing some casting competitions and those kind of things. And changed for me a little bit, got married and had was going to have our first daughter and figured I needed to grow up a little bit, and so went back to work at went back to work at Cabelas. So I took a job there back at Cabelas corporate in Sydney, Nebraska, and moved back home and, was a planning inventory manager, variety of things there, but mostly working in the fishing areas, hunting a little bit. And, again, just really, it was a cool opportunity to kind of foster that opportunity to learn from great mentors and great people, and learned a lot about business. And I got to say, of all my work experiences, I think Cabelas is probably one of maybe the greatest place I've ever worked, from the standpoint of they took care of their people, they coached, they mentored, they trained. Great. And I think so much of what I've learned and has, even brought me into positions, that I've had in the last few years, has been that experience. And so there was a time then when, we heard Cabelas was sounded like they might merge with Bass Pro. And I took the opportunity to go work at Winston Fly Rods for a bit in Dillon, Montana. And that was awesome. And I'm a total fly rod geek and love to cast. And so that was pretty awesome. There was an opportunity for us to move back closer to home. And so to be closer back to family again. And so moved to Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and worked for VF Corp. Yeah. So VF owns North Face, Timberland, Smartwool, but I worked for Smartwool and Icebreaker for a number of years. Again, great group, great community, great people, learned a lot. Then spent a little bit of time at Excel Outdoors, which owns Sierra Designs, Kelty,
Okay.
yeah, Ultimate Direction, Slumberjack. And I feel very fortunate because I feel like I worked for some of the most iconic
You have. Yeah, you've
brands
hit
in the
them.
outdoor industry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're definitely was not planning to move or anything. In fact, if I can tell a little bit of a story, I told we'd moved around a little bit, as you can kind of hear, and we were living in Denver, and I told my youngest daughter that she was really wanting a new dog. We already had two English setters, but really was really wanting a border collie. And I told her, if the only way you're ever getting a dog is if we move again, not planning to move at all.
Oh, yeah.
And this opportunity came up for Mayfly, and I got a phone call about this role and asked if I would be interested in. And so, yeah, when we told the family that we were thinking about moving, my daughter's she remembered that very distinctly,
Dog.
and her first question was, "Does this mean I get a dog?" And so I will say we do have a border collie now, and
Okay.
my daughter's very happy. So yeah, we moved here about a year and a half ago, and yeah, that's kind of what brought me to
That's cool.
Mayfly. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
it's an amazing team. It's probably the next closest thing I've ever experienced to that time at Cabelas. It's a great team. It's great ownership. Really care about people and conservation and product. And it's a kind of a weird time in the fly fishing industry, coming off of COVID and kind of trying to figure out where things are going to settle for demand, and what do people want. And but it's also a fun time because it gives us an opportunity to innovate. And I've just really, really appreciated Mayfly Outdoors and the owners that we have,
Sure.
and the team here. So it's been a good transition. It's been
That's great. And as CEO, you get a chance to kind of shape some of that culture you were talking about that you really love the Cabelas, right?
Yeah, yeah, and we've really tried to, right? I think I learned a lot about culture from VF, and we've really tried to implement some things like every other Friday off, fishing Fridays as we call them, and really trying to make sure that we're paying a livable wage, and we're a B Corp, a certified B Corp. I think one of only two in the fly fishing industry, which more than anything just means that we're pretty transparent about what we pay and the conservation
Okay.
initiatives that we take on. And it's a it's a pretty arduous process, but I think we really want to embody and believe in those things, and if you believe in that, I think it's a great way to kind of show it and pull it forward that we definitely care about the bottom line, right? We have to make money, we have to be profitable, but we also have to do it in a way that's going to take care of people and culture and the planet, right? That kind of triple bottom line that people often talk about. And so that's a kind of the B Corp, and it really falls in line with like the fly line recycling programs that we've done. And we're the second largest aluminum recycler in the state of Colorado, right behind Coors. And
Is that right? Okay.
yeah. And then, we've got a couple of really cool projects that we're proud of, with working with Trout Unlimited this last year on native fisheries restoration
Okay.
work for greenback cutthroats, Colorado cutthroats, and a new one for the Rio Grande cutthroats. And really just a way for us to, do kind of a cool limited edition reel, but also partner with a conservation organization, not only donate to it, but I think one of the most important things that we can do with that is the education behind it, is really letting people know that there are these, super cool native trout species that live in really cool places in Colorado. Tell them about where those places are, and then try to fund some of those projects. And
Yeah, good for
so
you guys.
yeah.
That's fantastic. I love that idea of the triple bottom line. I hadn't thought of that. That's really neat. What new exciting things have you guys got coming out here pretty soon?
Man, I'll tell you, it's hard because there are so many cool, innovative companies and super smart people in fly fishing. And so we're, it's hard to do something that's different, but I'll tell you, we've got a couple of, so we started working with titanium recently. So we've got our classic Rove reel. We have a titanium version that's got titanium small parts in it, and really just trying to lighten them up, right, and add another level of rust resistance and corrosion resistance to it. And titanium's pretty cool, using that to replace some stainless steel parts. And yeah, so that's pretty cool. We're doing a new Abel base. So if you're a fly tire and like big chunky aluminum bases, we're going to now do Abel bases, which are can be finished in kind of any of the Abel finishes, 84 different finishes that we're pretty interested in doing. And then lots of new products from Airflow as well. So lots of new fly line designs and materials that we're trying to use to pull that forward as well, along with all the Trout Unlimited collabs that we're doing. We just launched a Major League Baseball reel, so we got a MLB license.
Really?
And so if you love baseball and you love fly fishing, you'll have to check out our not trying to be a commercial, but I think
no, let's go for it, man.
It's pretty cool because there's a lot of people that are super big fans, and so our first two will be Dodgers and Rockies, and being in Colorado. And so the Rockies reels, it's just super cool, right? It's this purple and black reel with the Colorado Rockies logo on it. And so
nice,
really cool way to pull forward. And I don't think anybody's ever done a MLB project like that in fly fishing. And I would just say we've got a very creative team, and I'm often just trying to keep up with them. And we have a couple new projects that we'll be launching here early in 2024 that are some collabs that I think will kind of blow people away. Areas where we need to be in fly fishing, and some partnerships that'll be really interesting. So
yeah, I wonder if you're going to do a Cincinnati Reds reel, because I got a buddy who refuses to go fly fishing or fishing at all, but he loves baseball. So maybe you can get me a Cincinnati Reds, and he's a big Reds fan. What do you think?
It's certainly on the it's on the docket for sure.
At some point, huh? Well, these reels really are beautiful reels. I mean, these Abel reels are, gosh, incredible. But I got to ask you, so I'm going to apologize in advance for asking the CEO of this company this question, but why does the world need a $2,000 reel?
That's a really good, need is an interesting word, right? I think strongly want or desire might be a little bit
that
better.
Might be a better word. Yeah.
I think it's one of the things I love about fly fishing is we're on one hand, we can be so interested in the pure performance, right? Like when you think about some of the new Euro nymphing rods and some of these techniques, right, of tight line nymphing and those kind of things, purely about how many fish can I catch. It's almost like, I'll probably get shot for saying this, but it's almost like a bass fishing, tournament style, like how many fish can I get to hand? Yeah. And competition casting, right? Same thing. What's the highest performance rod that I can get? And so you have all of this that's kind of on one spectrum, and then clear over on the other side. We have these, this more artistic fill, right? That we're still producing, and many people are buying bamboo rods every year, right? And
yeah, right.
Rods are $2,000 to $6,000, and does it have as good of performance characteristics as a graphite rod? Well, maybe not, but that's the cool thing about fly fishing bamboo. Is exactly right, and you can experience it in so many ways. And so, I think for us, Ross Reels is very much. They're beautiful, functional, innovative reels. Abel is the same thing. What we found with Abel is just this ability to be able to collaborate with some of the coolest artists in the industry, between Andrea Larco and Derek DeYoung and Casey Underwood, and really take that super cool artwork and use the reel as the canvas. And I don't think people often realize, but when you look at like a Derek DeYoung brown trout pattern that we have, those are literally hand painted in California, and generally take about 12 hours of paint time to finish. And so when you're getting a $2,000 reel, and it's a Derek DeYoung painted reel, it truly is a piece of artwork that not only originally came from Derek and the original artwork, and that's what we're trying to recreate, but then we have these recreation artists, right?
Okay.
That are in California that are literally sitting down and hand painting, recreating Derek's work or Andrea's work on the reel, and they super are cool. 8 to 14 hours to do that. So the money that you're spending on it is all about kind of the labor hours and buying a piece of art, right?
Yeah,
it's not just art. Something. Yeah, it truly is. Yeah.
So $2,000's kind of cheap for a really nice painting from a very famous guy. So
well, I tell you,
a deal.
I mean, it is. It's super functional, right? And we kill them, and the way that you can fish them. And I've got a couple that I fish, and got to definitely be careful with them. You don't want to damage them, but it's taking this great kind of foundational, functional, beautiful machine reel that's all made here in Montrose, Colorado. almost everything we do is made in Montrose, other than the fly lines that are done in the UK, and then adding that artistic element to it. So
Yeah,
it's,
yeah, yeah.
it's pretty unique. It's cool.
And these reels, I was watching a video online about how you guys make these. I'm assuming
Yeah.
this is kind of the standard, but it's a solid aluminum puck that you
Yeah.
start with, and you start carving, drilling that out with a CNC machine, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not familiar with the process, I would highly recommend, going on our website or just, Googling, looking for a search for how things are machined. But yeah, we buy, solid bar stock, 10-foot, bar stock cylinders of 6061 aluminum. They get cut up into pucks. It looks like a hockey puck, right? And,
Yeah.
a few inches in diameter, a couple inches wide. And it literally starts from that. And then, it goes on a variety of different CNC machines that we have that'll machine it out into the reels that you get, and then are machined and assembled here in Colorado, and then anodized and or painted in California. So, yep, USA made, Colorado made, California made,
How about that?
from solid bar stock all the way to your finished reel here. And
That's
there are other reel companies certainly that are doing that as well. But U.S. manufacturing is something we're pretty passionate about and strongly believe in, is the ability to produce products here. And
good
how do
for
we
you.
bring that manufacturing, into the United States? And one of the things that we definitely have the high end reels like you talked about. So, a Derek DeYoung reel, or if you were to get a Derek DeYoung reel with titanium hardware on it, I think you can get close to 2,800 or $2,900 now. But it is, the finest materials. It's got titanium. It's hand painted. At the same
best.
time, we've introduced a new reel this year from Ross Cimarron, which has been a classic model for us. But it's a new reel at $295. So $295 made in Colorado reel. 100% made in Colorado reel. So
Cool.
we really do try to hit the spectrum all the way from $295 to $29.95. So, and everywhere in between. Everybody wants to fly fish, and we don't want to try to leave anybody out. And we want to try to make sure we do more of that. And the other thing I think we love about that is that we can, that we're supporting conservation, we're supporting artists, we're supporting U.S. manufacturing, all through this kind of cool avenue of fly fishing. And really kind of helps tie it all
That's
together,
neat.
and purpose built for sure.
That's super cool. And then just briefly on airflow fly
Yeah.
lines, your big thing there is you're not using PVC, right? And you've done it a different way.
Yeah, and yep. So we're the one of maybe two, but the primary user of polyurethane. All the other major fly line manufacturers are PVC, and PVC is a great material for a lot of things. And we just believe that polyurethane in many ways is better as a more stable plastic, a more recyclable plastic,
Okay.
and it's actually made in a completely different way. So it's actually high pressure extruded instead of low pressure. And, we think we can get we believe we're getting a line that's more durable, a little bit of a harder finish to it. But then also the plastics again are more stable. And I think from our testing, we think that that's better for the environment, right? It's hard to say, any kind of plastic, but at the same time, if it's a more stable plastic, then that's going to be more inert. And then the recycling program that we're doing, right, on top of
Okay.
that. So when you get to the end of the life of the fly line, we can, you can take it to a local fly shop and dump it into a airflow fly line recycling box. And that's true not just of airflow, but we'll accept fly lines from, any manufacturer, any material, any plastic to go in there. So yeah, airflow is, polyurethane extruded fly lines made in the UK in Wales. And again, super proud of that facility and the ability to bring that kind of technology forward into the States, and
Yeah.
in a
That's
cool
wonderful.
and I think a more in our view, it's a really sustainable way to be able to make a fly line that should be able to
Great.
last a long time, and when it does wear out, you should be able to recycle it. So
That's great. That's
yeah.
great. Okay, I got to ask you this question because, being a CEO and being in leadership for many, many years, I'm really curious, like, have you been able to take lessons from fly fishing, right? And, use those in your role as a leader?
Yeah, I think what I would say is I've learned a lot from fly fishermen that I've met, through the course of my life that I think have really, helped shape me as a person and as a leader. I think more than maybe just fly fishing,
Yeah.
the fly fishers that I've met along the way. And I think that's one of the things that really has kept me in the fly fishing industry is the relationships and the mentoring and the coaching and, these collaborations and close-knit relationships that we have, and have just learned so much from, in product and leadership and communication. Still, got tons to learn and always trying to learn more and trying to be better. And Lord knows I've got a long ways to go, but have really appreciated the opportunity to work with and meet so many great people in fly fishing, that have helped along the way.
It's a great industry. It really is.
Yeah.
All right, I got to ask you, I always ask my guests this. So what's your favorite place for the hungry, thirsty angler at the end of the day over at North Sterling? Any great spots out there people should be knowing about?
There is a little brew pub there.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Parts and Labor Brewing Company in Sterling. So it's in the town of Sterling. It's a really cool little brew pub. They've got a couple of good beers, and yeah, it's probably the only place that we hit.
That's where you got to eat if you're out there, huh? Or bring your own.
It is. It's really good. Yeah. You guys check it
okay?
out. Yeah.
All right, check it out. Okay, now when you were a guide, did you have a favorite shore lunch you liked to serve up?
Oh man, we were pretty simple often, right? We would try to do some sandwiches. I think mostly what I really liked was when we were doing. I helped guide a little bit in North Parking outside of. Saratoga, Wyoming.
Sure. Yeah.
Silver Spur Outfitters there, and spent a couple of summers working with a couple of teams way back. This has been many, many years ago. But I think the thing I liked most about doing shore lunches with them was we'd grill, right? We'd stop for a little bit and we'd actually cook a hot lunch and do some steaks or burgers or brats or something like that. To me, there was nothing better than that, especially on a cool, balmy day to get some good hot food and take a little bit of a break.
Sounds pretty good. Jeff, thanks so much for doing the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet, man. Appreciate it anytime.
Okay, good. How can people, learn more about Mayfly Outdoors and Ross and Abel Reels and whatnot?
Oh gosh. Yeah. So, we're obviously on Instagram and Facebook and any of our websites, rossreels.com, abelreels.com, airflowusa.com, dynaking.com. And then we do have a Mayfly page as well, but
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Check it out, folks. So there you go. Well, Jeff, I wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow. And folks, thank you for listening to another Destination Angler podcast episode, the Carp episode. And we'll be sure to post Jeff's info about Jeff's company on the Destination Angler website and pictures of his top fly picks on our Facebook and Instagram pages. As always, you can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shaig50@gmail.com. Hey, if you like the show, please share it with a buddy. As always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain, a really cool little band out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.